They were already screaming when I heard them. Not panic screams. Those come later. These were the warm-up screams. I was off the books, court-martialed, waiting to be erased. Then I saw them. 3 men. 2 relaxed. Standing the way people stand when they think nobody is coming. 2 identical girls were pinned against a dead car. Rain pouring. 1 bleeding. Both shaking. I didn't announce myself. I closed distance. The first guy turned just in time to see my elbow. And then the pavement. He went down so fast he skipped the part where people fight back. The second one tried to be brave. Squared up. Threw a punch like he learned it from YouTube. I broke his confidence. Then his grip. Then his balance. He landed face first and stayed there. Like the road suddenly owed him money. The third one ran. I love that part. I grabbed him by the jacket, spun him, and introduced him to physics, regret, and the side of a car. He slid down slowly, reconsidering every decision that led to this moment. After that, just rain. Heavy breathing. Bodies learning new shapes. The girls grabbed onto me like I was cover fire. That's when I noticed the headlights. A car I hadn't heard pull up. Engine running. Not helping. Not leaving. Just watching. A man sat behind the wheel. Didn't shout. Didn't reach for a phone. Didn't step out. He stayed perfectly still. Like he was memorizing the scene. The rain kept falling. The girls kept holding on to me. And somewhere behind the glass, a stranger decided this moment mattered, even if none of us understood why yet. Rain was still hitting the ground when I broke eye contact with the car. Before I take you any further, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Stories like this don't survive unless people decide they matter. Now listen carefully. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for sirens. I've learned something about scenes like that. The longer you stay, the more people start asking questions you can't answer without losing something. Red and blue lights showed up late, bouncing off rain-soaked metal like they always do when the danger's already finished. Someone tried to thank me. I kept walking. Someone else asked my name. I didn't slow down. I don't belong to explanations anymore. Explaining is for people who still have a place to return to. I don't. I stepped past the wrecked car, past the bodies still deciding whether to breathe shallow or not at all, and into the dark like I'd done 1,000 times before, quiet, deliberate, already gone. Behind me I felt it. Not footsteps. Eyes. The twins were still standing there, soaked, shaking, holding on to each other like if one let go the night would take the other. One of them called out. Not loud. Not desperate. Just confused. I didn't turn around. Because if I had, I might have stayed. And staying has consequences. By the time the police tried to piece together what happened, all they had was rain, dented steel, and men who suddenly forgot how the night started. Their report was short, dry, carefully worded. Unknown female intervened. High-level combat proficiency observed. Suspect left scene before identification. That line followed me longer than the bruises. Because they weren't wrong. And they weren't close enough to understand how dangerous that was. I vanished before the questions could catch up. And the twins. They kept looking for someone who was never meant to be found. What none of us knew yet was that someone else had been watching the whole time. From behind a windshield. In silence. And that night, without realizing it, I stepped straight back into a war I thought I'd already lost. I didn't know it that night. I walked away thinking the road had swallowed everything behind me. The rain, the violence, the witnesses. I was wrong. Later, I learned what happened after I disappeared. He didn't follow me. He didn't step out of the car. He sat there for a long time, hands still on the wheel, engine running like he couldn't decide whether to leave or go back in time. Rain kept sliding down his windshield, warping the image of the road where his daughters had almost vanished. When his phone rang, he answered it immediately. No hesitation. Just one word. Safe. That was all they said at first. Safe. And something in his chest loosened, but not completely. Because safety doesn't erase questions. They talked fast. Overlapping. Like people afraid the moment would disappear if they didn't trap it in words. She didn't shout. She didn't hesitate. She just moved. One of them said my hands didn't shake. The other said I didn't look angry. I hate that part. Because trained people never look angry. They look finished. He listened without interrupting. No reassurance. No scolding. Just silence on the line. Inside his head, things weren't lining up. That shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have been there. That road. That hour. That level of violence. He replayed the scene he'd watched from behind glass. The way I stood. The way I positioned myself. The way the fight ended without dragging on. It bothered him. Not because of fear. Because of precision. He told himself it was coincidence. Bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time. People believe that when the alternative is admitting the world almost took something from them. He hung up and sat there longer than necessary, rain ticking against metal like a countdown. Somewhere in his mind, a detail refused to settle. The woman didn't behave like a stranger. She behaved like someone who had been trained to arrive when things were already too late. And make them stop anyway. I didn't know any of that then. I only knew I was back on borrowed time. And somewhere behind me, a man who didn't believe in coincidence had just started remembering a night he didn't fully understand yet. I wasn't there when they explained it. But later, every word came back to me like an after-action report read too slowly. They told him they hadn't been sneaking out, hadn't been reckless, hadn't been lying. It was a school project. That's the part that still hits wrong. A science assignment. Deadlines. Grades. Normal kid pressure. They needed a chemical compound. Rare, controlled, the kind schools don't keep sitting on a shelf. A lab tech had agreed to hand it off after hours. Quiet. Quick. No drama. Just a stop on the way home. That was the plan. He listened, arms crossed, already filing it under safe enough. Because adults like clean categories. School is safe. Labs are safe. Home is safe. Violence lives somewhere else. He told them that road wasn't dangerous. That the hour didn't matter. That nothing like that should have happened. That's when one of them corrected him. She said the car died without warning. Said the lights came on but no one slowed down. Said the men didn't look surprised to find them there. He dismissed it as fear filling in blanks. Parents do that. It's easier than accepting how thin the line really is. He couldn't reconcile it. That location. That hour. That level of brutality. Because if all of that could collide around his children, then danger wasn't distant. It wasn't theoretical. It had been close enough to touch them. He believed danger lived far away from his daughters. That night proved him wrong. And somewhere between his denial and their certainty, the shape of the woman who saved them refused to disappear. Neither did the question he didn't ask out loud yet. What kind of person shows up exactly when things go bad, and leaves like she was never meant to be seen? While they were trying to sleep again, I was sitting under fluorescent lights that never turn off. Different room. Same kind of silence. The kind that watches you. The paperwork moved fast after that night. Too fast for truth. Perfect speed for punishment. They didn't call it hesitation. They called it disobedience. They didn't call it restraint. They called it excessive force. They didn't call it judgment earned under fire. They called it uncontrolled judgment. Men in clean uniforms explained my life back to me like I hadn't lived it. They spoke about angles. Procedures. Rules written by people who'd never felt hands shaking behind them in the dark. I listened. Because listening is all you're allowed to do when the system decides you're a problem to be solved. Every word felt rehearsed. Every accusation felt safe for them. They never asked why I moved the way I did. They never asked who would have paid the price if I hadn't. They only asked whether I stayed inside the lines. My voice stayed flat when it was my turn. No anger. No defense. Just facts. Because I already knew something they didn't. The truth doesn't matter until someone powerful needs it to. If you've ever been judged by people who never stood where you stood, tap like. Then listen to what happens next. Because while they were building a case against me, somewhere else, someone was starting to realize that the night he'd been trying to forget wasn't done with him yet. I didn't know his name yet, didn't know his face, but I felt it when the air shifted. That's how pressure works. You don't see it arrive, you feel it settle. Somewhere above my pay grade, my file was reassigned. Not delayed. Not buried. Reopened. He read my record without context first. That's what they do when they want the facts clean and the people distant. Age. Younger than expected. Too young for the number of deployments. Too young for how many lines were blacked out. Combat-style notes caught his attention. Decisive. Close quarters dominant. Low noise, high efficiency. That last one stuck. Then the psychological profile. Words like contained, detached, operational under stress. He didn't like how neutral it sounded. People who write profiles like that usually miss something important. He turned the page. Paused. One line broke rhythm. Subject disappeared briefly during incident timeline. Not fled. Not retreated. Disappeared. Rain. A shape stepping back into the dark. A woman moving without urgency. Two girls clinging to her like she was solid ground. The memory surfaced fast, uninvited. He felt it, sharp and uncomfortable. Then he shut it down. Coincidence. Different night. Different person. He told himself that because the alternative raised questions he wasn't ready to ask. He closed the file and moved on. But the problem with precision is that it leaves patterns. And once you notice one, you don't stop seeing it. I didn't hear it when they said it, but later it would echo louder than any accusation ever thrown at me. They brought her up again, the woman from the rain. Not with fear, with curiosity. One of them said it casually, like she was talking about the weather. She stood like you stand when you're angry. That was all. No drama. No emphasis. Just an observation. The room went still. He didn't look at them. Didn't ask what they meant. Because he knew. People who've carried authority long enough recognize posture before faces. He stayed quiet. Too quiet. And in that silence, his mind started moving. He asked for times. Exact ones. What hour the car died? How long before the men showed up? How long before I arrived? He checked distances. Routes. Late nights he'd already dismissed suddenly reopened. Still, he told himself it proved nothing. Training creates similarities. Coincidences happen. He couldn't accept a theory built on instinct. But denial doesn't stop calculation. It just makes it quieter. By the time he went to sleep that night, numbers were already lining up in his head. Rain. A case file. A woman who vanished when the danger passed. He still didn't know the truth. But the space between certainty and doubt had narrowed. And once that happens, there's no going back. I didn't know it then, but that was the night the past stopped staying buried. He wasn't looking for answers about me. Not yet. He was doing what men like him do when sleep won't come. Working. Scrolling through records that had nothing to do with rain, or roads, or two frightened girls who wouldn't leave his thoughts alone. Until a file surfaced where it didn't belong. Old. Sealed. Marked resolved. A missing child. Declared lost years ago. The kind of case people stop opening because hope becomes a liability. He almost skipped it. Almost. A name caught his eye. He clicked. The room went very quiet. A photo loaded slowly. Older system, older scars. His hands stopped moving. Not because he recognized her. Because his body did. The face didn't match perfectly. Years change bone. Hard lives sharpen edges. But the eyes. The eyes were wrong in a way that felt familiar. Too steady. Too watchful. The kind of eyes that learned early not to ask for help. He stared longer than necessary. Ran the dates. Did the math. Time went elastic. This didn't make sense. It couldn't. He told himself the resemblance was coincidence. Grief teaches you to see patterns where none exist. But the ache didn't leave. Because once you've lost something once, your instincts never fully stand down again. He closed the file, opened it again, and for the first time since that night on the road, he didn't push the thought away. He let it sit there, unfinished, uncomfortable, waiting, and somewhere far from him. I stood alone under another set of lights, unaware that a face I hadn't seen in years had just resurfaced and was starting to remember me back. I didn't feel it yet, but something had shifted. He went back to the file, not like a man chasing answers, like one trying to disprove a threat. He told himself it was coincidence. That time plays tricks. That memory reshapes faces to fit unfinished grief. But coincidence doesn't survive scrutiny. He reopened records that hadn't been touched in years. Suppressed notes. Redacted timelines. Decisions signed and forgotten. Each page made it worse. The missing child hadn't vanished. She'd been moved. Jurisdictions crossed. Reports rewritten. A trail that thinned just enough to disappear. He stopped reading when one thought surfaced. DNA would end this. And that thought terrified him. Because DNA doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about rank, history, or what the truth would destroy. So he resisted it. Told himself there were other explanations. Better ones. Safer ones. But the problem with truth is that once it enters the room, authority stops feeling solid. If you're still here, stay with me. Because this is where truth stops waiting to be discovered and starts fighting back. I was still walking into rooms where people measured me like a problem, while somewhere else. He stopped pretending. He laid the timelines side by side. The night of the rescue. The stretch of minutes where I vanished from official sight. The gap no one could account for without asking the wrong questions. They lined up too clean. He pulled security footage from my assessment reviews. Old combat evaluation clips. Grainy. Muted. He watched the way I entered a space. Not rushing. Not hesitating. The way I closed distance without telegraphing intent. The way I controlled bodies instead of chasing damage. The way I ended fights before they spilled. He paused the frame. Zoomed in. The stance. The balance. The restraint. Rain-soaked memory slid back into focus. A woman stepping forward. 3 men stepping back. No wasted movement. It clicked. Not like an epiphany. Like a weapon seating into place. She wasn't reckless, he realized. She was exact. Exact as trained. Exact as deliberate. Exact as someone who knows what happens if they get it wrong. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. Because now the question wasn't if. It was how long he'd been looking at the truth without admitting it. And once that happens, every word in my file starts to read differently. Not as a liability, but as a weapon the system no longer knows how to control. The answer came without ceremony. No courtroom. No witnesses. No speeches. Just a sealed envelope slid across a desk that didn't creak under pressure. DNA doesn't argue. It doesn't soften language. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just tells the truth and waits for you to deal with it. He read it once. Didn't move. Read it again. Still didn't move. Because the result didn't say possible. Didn't say likely. It said confirmed. I was his child. The one declared missing. Filed away as unresolved. Buried under time and paperwork and decisions made to keep systems clean. The system didn't lose me. It absorbed me. Turned a missing child into a recruit. Turned silence into discipline. Turned survival into doctrine. And now, that same system was trying to erase me for doing exactly what it trained me to do. He didn't call anyone. Didn't celebrate. Didn't break. He sat alone with the weight of it pressing straight down through his spine. Because the truth had teeth. If he acknowledged me, he had to acknowledge everything that followed. That the night on the road wasn't chance. That the woman who stepped into the rain wasn't just trained. She was blood. His blood. And now she stood accused by the very machine that raised her when he wasn't there to stop it. Some truths don't arrive gently. They arrive like orders you can't refuse. And once they land, nothing stays neutral ever again. I felt it before I saw it. That subtle change in a room when momentum breaks. The hearing started like every other one. Controlled voices, rehearsed gravity, people already convinced they knew how the story ended. They were halfway through listing my violations when someone interrupted. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. New evidence was introduced. Not excuses, not character statements, facts. The incident on the road was reframed not as rumor, not as hearsay, but as verified intervention. Medical reports, police timelines, photographs of damage that didn't lie. The room shifted. Then the twins were brought in. Small, steady, unflinching. They didn't embellish, didn't cry. They said what happened. Who stepped between them and the men. How she moved. How she didn't shout or posture or lose control. She told us to breathe, one of them said. That landed harder than any punch I'd thrown. No one spoke after that. Not because they were persuaded. Because there was nothing left to argue. Silence filled the room, the kind that comes when truth arrives without asking permission. I kept my eyes forward. Didn't look for allies. Didn't look for him. I didn't need to. I knew the verdict had already shifted. Because systems can ignore rules. They can bend procedure. But they can't unsee proof. And in that moment, the same discipline they tried to use against me turned and cut clean through their case. The gavel came down slower than usual. Not out of hesitation. Out of respect. And just like that, the war they thought they were winning ended without another shot fired. They were already preparing to move on. Paperwork. Procedural language. The system resetting itself like it always does after a mistake. That's when he stood. Not rushed. Not dramatic. The kind of movement that makes a room stop breathing. He stepped forward into the open space and spoke once, calm, measured, undeniable. He stated his name, then his position. The weight of it landed immediately. Faces changed. Postures corrected. Spine straightened. Then he did something no one expected. He looked directly at me. Not like an officer. Not like an authority. Like a man standing in front of something he could no longer avoid. He revealed who he was. Then he revealed who I was. Not with softness. Not with apology. With precision. He spoke of a child declared missing. Of records sealed too early. Of a life rerouted by systems that don't wait for permission. He said my name. The room went dead quiet. Not shock. Recognition. Because suddenly every piece fit. Why the file felt wrong. Why the rescue didn't look reckless. Why discipline and restraint sat so naturally in my bones. He didn't reach for me. Didn't explain himself. He didn't need to. Truth doesn't beg to be believed, it stands. I stayed still. Eyes forward. Hands relaxed. Because this wasn't a reunion. This was a collision. Of past and present. Blood and duty. Orders and identity. And when he finished speaking, there was nothing left to clarify. No appeal. No argument. Just a clean line drawn through every lie that had survived until now. The room didn't erupt. It absorbed it. Because some revelations don't explode. They settle. And once they do, nothing ever goes back to the way it was. They didn't clap. No one cheered when the charges were withdrawn. Papers slid across the table. Signatures followed. Just like that, the words that were supposed to erase me were struck through. Status restored. Not as a favor. Not as mercy. As correction. The room emptied the way it always does after truth finishes its work, quiet, efficient, slightly ashamed. He waited until everyone else left. No uniform talk. No titles. Just two people standing in the aftermath of something that had been missing too long. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't need to. Some gaps are too wide for apologies. He just said my name again, carefully this time, like it carried weight. The twins were brought in last. They smiled when they saw me. Not because I was safe. Because I was real. We stood there without hugging, without tears, without speeches. Because this wasn't a reunion built on emotion. It was built on truth. And truth doesn't rush. I walked out of that building with my spine straight and my record clean. Not redeemed. Recognized. I didn't get my past back. I didn't need it. I got something better. The right to stand exactly where I am without being erased. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe, share it. Some truths only survive when people refuse to look away.